When Steve went back to return the Infinity Stones, it wasn't as clean as everyone thinks. Steve was never the type to just drop something off and leave. He always stayed long enough to make sure damage was controlled, even if he couldn't undo it. When he reached 1970 to return the Space Stone and the Pym particles, security inside the base was tighter than expected, and to avoid being detected he hid inside a restricted archive research lab. That's where he ran into Arnim Zola. Not the fully transformed Hydra mastermind yet, but already brilliant and already dangerous. Zola immediately noticed something was off about Steve. The material of his suit, the shield design, even the way he reacted to movement. Zola didn't know Steve was from the future, but he knew he was looking at something that didn't belong in his time. They had a short, tense conversation where Zola talked about how history is not written by heroes or villains, but by those who survive long enough to shape it. While talking, Zola secretly ran low-level scans using lab equipment, capturing traces of Steve's bioenergy signature. Not enough to recreate him, but enough to understand what future enhanced humans might look like. Steve returned the Space Stone, but before leaving he realized something else. He had taken more Pym particles than were originally removed. And instead of returning all of them, he kept a small hidden reserve. Not because he was selfish, but because he realized the future might need time travel again one day. So he hid the extra particles somewhere only he would ever find. This became part of why he later chose to stay in the past. If he returned fully to the present, that backup would be useless. But if he stayed, he could act as a living emergency plan if timelines ever started collapsing again. When he moved forward to return the Mind Stone in 2012, he discovered something he couldn't fix. Loki had already escaped earlier. That timeline was already fractured. Steve returned the stone perfectly, but it didn't matter. The damage had already started. That branch timeline didn't explode or disappear instantly. Instead, it became unstable slowly. Technology developed differently. Power structures shifted. Events started diverging faster and faster. It became a timeline that would eventually collapse under its own instability. When Steve went to return the Reality Stone, he didn't interfere with anything. By this point, he had learned that even small emotional decisions could echo forward into massive consequences. He stopped trying to fix history and instead focused only on reducing damage. But the moment that changed him the most was Vormir. When Steve arrived on Vormir to return the Soul Stone, he came face to face with Red Skull again. But this wasn't their old enemy dynamic anymore. They were both men shaped by forces bigger than themselves. Red Skull told him something strange. He said the universe doesn't punish evil, it punishes imbalance. Steve asked about Natasha, and Red Skull told him her sacrifice balanced something cosmic, something larger than any one life. Then Red Skull told Steve something even worse. He told him Steve now carried imbalance himself. Steve understood what he meant. He had taken more Pym particles than needed. He had knowledge of future events. He had interfered with history simply by existing in it longer than he was meant to. He realized he had taken more from time than he returned. And that's when Steve made his final real decision. Staying in the past wasn't just about Peggy. It was about responsibility. If timeline collapse or incursions ever started happening, someone needed to exist outside normal timeline flow. Someone who remembered how things were supposed to be. Steve became a living failsafe for reality. Meanwhile, the timeline where Loki escaped kept getting worse. Over time, it started collapsing. Not through war. Not through destruction. Through instability. Reality itself couldn't maintain it anymore. But when timelines collapse in Marvel logic, sometimes fragments survive. Sometimes people get pushed out before everything disappears. From that dying timeline, someone survived. Someone who watched his entire universe get erased. Someone who watched reality abandon his world. That survivor became Doom. Not exactly the comic version, but someone forged in a universe that was deleted. Someone who believes timelines must be controlled because freedom leads to collapse. Someone who believes heroes don't save worlds, they destabilize them. Tony saved the universe. Steve made sure the timeline held together long enough for that universe to keep existing. But in doing that, Steve may have accidentally created the conditions for something worse. Because when realities die, survivors don't become heroes. They become people who never want to lose their world again. And that is where doomsday really begins. Not with invasion. Not with war. But with someone who remembers what it feels like when existence itself decides your world was a mistake.